I'll share. All right, great. People can see the slide deck?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So, still see the slide deck? Or is it just the email?
We see
The
I have
profile.
a document with my bio.
Okay. All right, let me just stop share real quick then. But let me introduce the speakers we have today. So our first speaker today is Dr. Cindy Escobar Alvarez. She's the Program Director for Medical Research at Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. So she manages these initiatives to support clinical research, and she's been overseeing ways to support early career physician scientists. Then our next speaker is Paige Cooper. Dr. Paige Cooper works at the Burroughs Wellcome Fund as a program officer. She's focused on the biomedical and reproductive sciences, as well as managing individual and institutional awards that support physician scientist development. She joined Burroughs Wellcome Fund following several years serving as the director of Duke BioCorp Biosciences program, where she was responsible for designing innovative and practical programming for both the academic and professional development needs of her PhD and undergrad student scholars. She completed her BS in biochemistry and was a Marx Scholar at Spelman College. So just kind of keep it relatively brief, given how accomplished everyone is here. And then our next speaker is Dr. Irfan, physician scientist. He's an assistant professor and director of the research development at the College of Osteopathic Medicine at Michigan State University. He is also course director for evidence-based medicine that's delivered over 300 medical students, that's delivered to over 300 medical students each year. He focuses on epidemiology, population and global health, data science, machine learning, and covers a spectrum of chronic diseases. He's also on the advisory board for a Silicon Valley company that advises on health technology, market ecosystem, and recommendation for new areas for investment. So let me just go over. Share screen again. Okay, so those are our speakers. So just a little bit of background. I know everyone here knows these backgrounds, but for the speaker or for the panel, the attendees, we want to just remind everyone about the leaky pipeline of physician scientists. So we know that in general, the leakiest part of the pipeline tends to be at the junior faculty, fellow resident level, and many things have contributed to this, including low grant funding rates. And in trying to balance research and clinical demands, there's a huge economic misalignment of incentives. So for example, as a clinician, I can make double or triple what I make as a physician scientist in academia. And then also increasing burden of work-life balance, particularly with COVID. But we know physician scientists are crucial for mediating and developing therapies, vaccines, prevention strategies. And COVID has made everything worse. So we wanted to bring this session together because of the previous study of MD PhD program outcomes. So there were 80 programs, more than 10,000 alumni were sent surveys. They had a pretty good response rate. It was like in the 70-80 percentile, which is much better than some of the surveys that we've done with APSA. But they were very diligent in following up with the program directors, and the directors reached out to their alumni. So you can see in general, we've had increasing number of MD PhD graduates over the years. And we do see a trend that there are more females as well. Like these were just the representation of the alumni, but this reflects the AAMC data. And so the good news is that we do have more females matriculating into MD PhD programs, although hasn't quite reached parity yet. And the other good news is, in general, most physician scientists who graduate and finish their clinical training do stay in academia, but there are some trends that more and more are kind of going towards industry and private practice in terms of the more recent graduates. And if you look at the physician scientists who have stayed in academia, majority of their funding actually comes from non-NIH sources. And then also looking at non-NIH funding here as well, you can see that past and current, the majority of the PIs actually have an alternative funding source to support their research. So what are the other sources for funding? A majority of the respondents actually said it came from foundation grants, either current or previously. And then there's also a good portion that get pharma funding, and then other industry funding, other funding, and then this is the K award population. So without further ado, I just want to give people a little bit of background in terms of why we want to bring the session together. And certainly we need to continue to advocate for increased NIH funding, particularly support for physician scientists. But we're grateful for our three wonderful speakers here today who have been doing their part with their organizations to promote funding for physician scientists and support of physician scientists for their research. And we also, Dr. Irfan is here to talk about his experiences with getting alternative funding as well. So I'm going to stop my share. And Cindy, if you can go first.
Absolutely. And let me unmute. Thanks again for the invitation. And my voice is going out. Let me turn off my heater. I'm glad to speak about funding opportunities for physician scientists. And I'm going to start just my timer so I can see how long I'm going. And there is the Cherbold Foundation. Many of you might be familiar with us, as we have been supporting physician scientists for almost 25 years now. But we are part of the medical research program, which I represent, is part of a group of organizations that are all working to support well-being of people on the planet for more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. So I invite you to come to our website and learn more about the full breadth of things we do. And of course, in terms of medical research, we're seeking to advance prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of human disease. And we think that physician scientists are innovators, clinical innovators. You can spot an unmet medical need, a clinical need, whether it is to increase access of services to patients or to develop a new therapy that requires understanding of a mechanism of disease or change a health policy. So with that, all I'll say is please go to our website. In the fall, we have two opportunities that we are you can see that we're going to launch. One is for subspecialty fellows, and the other one is for early faculty. And so the best way you can find about it is by subscribing to our distribution list on our website. And as it was mentioned, nonprofit funders contribute to supporting research, and we're a small part. If you look at the whole funding for science and technology, nonprofits are about 7%, and at least in 2019. But if you look, even though we're small, if you look more specifically at health research funders, this is an example of an organization that's called the Health Research Alliance that represents about 100 and something nonprofit funders. So you have Doris Duke, Boris Wellcomes are all part of that, American Heart Association, so on. A large portion of the funding that we collectively provide goes to supporting career development and training initiatives. So we support early career scientists. Not all of them go to physician scientists, but there are many of us who support physician scientists. And I invite you to go to this link and really see more. There's a lot of information here about what nonprofit funders in this group support and how we do it. And so I will talk mostly about competitive processes, although there are other funding from nonprofits that is not competitive, and that's probably subject of another talk. But the good news is there is funding, right? But not, the challenge is that the success rates for nonprofit award competitions vary, and they can be highly competitive. So for Doris Duke, about 10% of applications that are reviewed actually get funded. So if your application doesn't get funded, it doesn't mean that it wasn't good. It means there was a lot of other applications, right? But that varies, and depending on the field, some nonprofits success rates might be a little higher. It's still pretty competitive. And then there are things that are out of your control and not necessarily unique to nonprofits. But for example, for Doris Duke, in a time period that we studied, the success rate for women applying to our faculty award was half that of men's. And now you cannot control that, right? But we we are trying to do better, right? And then here's a link, not a link, but a paper where we describe this work. And I'm glad to share that that is no longer the case, but that can also affect your success rate. And overall, nonprofit funders want you to succeed, right? So here are just two pieces, if you haven't seen them, about how nonprofit funders are working to make sure that every application comes in, gets fairly reviewed, and that we recognize all the good ideas that come into our door. So with that, there are things that you as an applicant can do to maximize your success rate. But what are those, right? One is the goal alignment. And when you see a request for proposals, ask yourself, is where I'm trying to get to, or what I'm trying to do with my research, aligned with what this request for proposal says? So if you're seeking K2R, but the award is F2K, then perhaps it's not the right one, right? And you could apply, but you might not get reviewed. So that comes to the eligibility. So we all spell out eligibility criteria, and it's not meant to exclude anyone, but to maximize the chances that this is the right opportunity for the people who are applying, right? And so if somebody doesn't meet the eligibility criteria, chances are their applications might not get reviewed. The other way in which you can enhance your probability of success is by looking at the review criteria that will be used. And at Doris Duke, we make it a practice to share the same review criteria that the reviewers will get are present in the request for proposal. So as an applicant, you see that. You see what the reviewers will be looking for. So taking the time to making sure that there's information in a proposal that can inform what the reviewers will be looking for can enhance your chances for success. And, this compliance, I cannot stress it enough, about 20 to 25% of all submissions to our competitions are not reviewed because they were missing a part. We even, might be missing a piece of key, like you don't have a biographical sketch attached. We have tried to help you by providing checklists, and hopefully those are useful, but we welcome feedback. But those, we cannot provide a reviewer with an incomplete application. And finally, one is application readiness. You have peers take your time to develop a proposal. It might be, you might be trying out to get practice and submit to one of these competitions. But the more you take the time to develop it and talk to your peers, the more likely it is you'll submit a plan that is cohesive and that speaks clearly to your ideas and makes them justice. So this is just to end. Please sign up to our listserv, and if you have questions, we do reply to emails that come to this email address. So please get in touch, and I will stop there. You're muted.
Muted, Jennifer. Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you, Cindy. Will Paige or Dr. Cooper please speak next?
Sure thing. So hopefully I am sharing my screen. And while I'm kind of setting myself up, I just wanted to echo and thank Cindy for sharing that aspect, because I'm going to focus more on our actual awards, but all of the aspects that Cindy highlighted about reviewing your eligibility and getting support from others as you're applying is certainly some of the same things that we see and hear from successful and unsuccessful applicants. So at Burroughs Welcome Fund, I just want to start by, for those who may not be as familiar with our mission statement, and that is to serve and strengthen our society by nurturing a diverse group of leaders in biomedical sciences to improve human health through education and empowering discovery in frontiers of greatest need. So with that, we have several different areas of focus within BWF that is managed by different program officers that range from physical scientists and that application to the biomedical workforce, as well as science education and so on and so forth. And these are a few of the areas that we cover in kind of the breakdown of how those kind of funds are split through a fiscal year cycle. So in terms of physician scientists support, BWF has been active in this area for quite a while. And I'm going to kind of briefly cover some of the main awards that have gone on and then move on to the current awards that are available for current physician scientists. So we started out with a CABS award, and that went from 95 to 2006. And the focus there was actually eligibility for both PhD and MD PhDs. And that award we ran for 12 years. And I want to particularly note that there was only about 20% that were MD only. And so the vast majority of those were MD PhDs. So that is where we see the bulk of applications for physician scientists. And the next award, we stopped running that award and changed the eligibility a little bit as the K99 emerged and kind of took over in terms of supporting principally PhDs only in that. So some of the other awards that we have run are the Clinical Scientist Training Award for Translational Research, which is currently no longer active, as well as what is currently active, the CAMS Award, and that is probably one that you might be familiar with and has been running since 2007 and is ongoing. And coming back to Cindy's point, so in terms of actual award rates, we are at about 10 to 15% in any given year with respect to the funding rate. So a newer initiative that I wanted to point out that is relevant, though not an individual award, is our Physician Scientist Institutional Awards. And that award was given to 10 institutions to support physician scientist development with a particular interest in supporting MD-only researchers. And over time, between these 4 different initiatives, we've invested in 250 million and counting in supporting physician scientists. So this is an area that we are strongly committed to and want to encourage those of you who are eligible for our different awards to apply. So this is busy, but I'm going to start here with an overview, and then I'm going to focus on the CAMS award because that's the one that might be most relevant, but try and touch on the others as well. So if we think of this broken down by career stage, the BWF awards that might be relevant for residents and fellows, we have career awards that might be relevant, a research award, as well as a professional development award. And then if you are a faculty member, there are primarily research awards that you would be eligible for. So if we start with the career awards, the primary one that is most relevant to physician scientists or that we find most applied to is the CAMS award. And that is a 5-year award that is for $700,000 total and is a bridging award from postdoc to faculty. And again, the focus is trying to increase the number of physician scientists that will go on to lead us both in the clinic and on the research side of things. And usually there are about 10 to 14 awards per cycle. And then in terms of timeline and eligibility, I will touch on eligibility in just a second, but usually the application opens in July. And I put the application information for this coming year and cycle, but this tends to be rather consistent over the years. So note that it's for this year, but kind of keep it in mind if this is not where you're at just yet. So the application is live in July. The applications are due in October. And then the finalists are interviewed in March of the following year. So in this case, March 2023. And in terms of eligibility, we focus on candidates who have an MD only or some professional degree, as the ones noted here, and then also MD PhDs. So We're focused on biomedical sciences and translational research, but we do not do the health service research area or large scale clinical trials. And candidates need to be 13 years or less past their clinical doctorate degree, and they're eligible to have a junior faculty appointment, but we kind of keep that to a lecturer, instructor, or non-tenure track. And if you happen to be kind of heading on to the market, so long as you haven't signed a offer letter by the application date, you should still be eligible. And then the final thing I wanted to note about eligibility is that we don't allow for having an R01 or early career K if you plan to apply. So in terms of kind of how this has shaped out for those who have received the award, there's been total about 164 awards made, and most of them go on to pursue their faculty track. Some do go on to pursue industry or some other opportunity, and that is all, in my personal opinion, all good, and we need scientists in that area as well. And in terms of the last few cycles, there's normally about 100 applications plus per year. So again, for these next few, I'm going to run through relatively quickly so that we have time to chat. But the Cassie Award is also a career transition award and is focused on those who are in the physical sciences and applying their training to the biological sciences. And it's a 5-year postdoc to faculty bridging award. And for the next cycle, opens in July, and something that's different is there's a pre-proposal deadline and then a full proposal deadline, and then still an interview process towards the end. And then in terms of the research awards, this award is specifically for junior faculty. So you have to be an assistant professor, and it's a 5-year award, and specifically for investigators that are focused on infectious disease and pathogenesis. And again, for the infectious disease program, there is a pre-proposal and then a full proposal that comes later on in the year. And the other award that I manage is the Next Generation Pregnancy Initiative. And this award is focused on those who focus on patrition, as well as issues related to preterm birth or other adverse pregnancy outcomes. And we aim this at postdocs and senior faculty, and is a 4-year award focused on the research project. And then in terms of cycle, opens in September and closes in December, and there's an interview process in April. And then for time's sake, I'm just gonna hit this last one and then stop. So there is an innovation award, and this again is a research focused project that supports those who are interested in developing methodologies to improve the regulatory process and science around the decisions that we make, primarily think FDA, and those that are interested in that research space. This is an award that could be right on target with your area of focus. And I do want to note that this award is actually biannual, so we give it every other year instead of annually. And then this is a breakdown of the timeline. November, and then November it opens and it closes in February, and then interview in May. Sorry, one more award, and that's the PDEP award. And it is a 3-year award, and it's a $60K grant. And for those that are in the postdoc phase, or fellowship phase. This is specifically for diverse researchers that are doing their research and is particularly focused on actually making sure that you have the professional development resources that are needed. And that includes using these funds towards attending scientific conferences that are relevant to your work, as well as resources that are needed in the lab or laptops, et cetera, to support your efforts as you kind of transition to the next phase of your career. And this is the timeline for that. And I will skip to that final overview and oops. Again, these are kind of the awards. Hopefully you can take a snapshot of these different awards and when you'd be eligible. And I will stop with sharing. This is kind of a picture of our headquarters in Durham, North Carolina. And these are ways that you can stay in touch. We love Science Twitter, as I hope you all have been exploring and discovering. And this is kind of some of the handles of individuals as well as the organization as a whole.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. We'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Irfan.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my slides? Okay, so I've got a short, like 3-slide presentation. It kind of, kind of introduces what I do, and so on top here is a picture of all the places I've worked at. So let's start. I'm a physician scientist by background. I was born here in this place, Dubai, and grew up here, went to school here. I am of Pakistani origin, so I went to do medical school at Aga Khan University, Pakistan. Some of you may have heard of Aga Khan University. It's a leading medical university on 2 continents, Pakistan, Asia, and East Africa and Tanzania. It has a leading portfolio in global health and women and child health. I took a break from med school, got a couple of scholarships, including one at Sick Kids at University of Toronto, where I studied stem cells and genetics for a year, then went back to Aga Khan University to finish med school. I worked in Pakistan as a physician for a few years, then moved back to Dubai, worked as a physician there, then moved here to Qatar, worked as a physician scientist here. Then the medical corporation gave me a scholarship to do my PhD in epidemiology at Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Karolinska Institute is the place that awards the Nobel Prize in medicine each year. I finished my PhD, got a faculty position here at Michigan State, and then did my MBA along with my faculty position in Indianapolis in an evening MBA program. And so that's in a nutshell kind of my journey so far. And with that kind of a background, I will just move on to these conventional research funding sources that almost all of you know about, from NIH, NSF. We've had Cindy and Paige talk about grant funding, and so these are Department of Defense funding, et cetera. These are the usual routes of funding that majority of the PIs apply for, and they can either make or break your career, and it happens all around us. And you know, Paige and Cindy's are the gatekeepers of this world of competitive, and how competitive it is. It's crazy competitive, and it's going to keep on becoming more and more competitive each year. I've yet to meet anyone from any of these places who said that, hey, it's getting less competitive compared to the past few years. So the applicant pool is going to keep on increasing. The competition is going to get more and more intense. And it's a pyramid scheme where, you know, few and fewer make it to the top and get those kind of funding. Which brings me to my next slide. And this is why this slide is the most important one, because this is where it doesn't get competitive. This is where you get the money to actually apply for those competitive places on slide 1. So So this is what a lot of, very few people talk about this. Now, not to say that this is not competitive, but I put in USAID over there, which is very, very competitive. The reason is not a lot of people think about USAID automatically when it comes to applying for research funding, more because a lot of people think that it is more implementation science in developing countries. But a lot of the RFAs that come out of USAID, World Bank, etc., have a significant proportion of innovation and research as well. And so if someone kind of tells it's more of implementation science, just sift through those grants, and you will come across grants that are looking for innovation and new research, even breakthrough science, and implemented in developing countries. So if you have this, if you have an inclination of ever working in developing countries, get outside of NIH, get outside of, Fogarty and all of these things, and start thinking about USAID, World Bank. Another thing I would recommend is, even if you are not inclined towards working in developing countries, start thinking about it, because science is science. It works just as well in Africa and Asia and South America as it does in the US. And I would say sometimes the impact is way more in developing countries than in the US. In fact, I'm part of a group that's actually trying to reverse the conventional thinking of, hey, it's precision medicine. Let's just do it with Novartis and Johnson & Johnson and make immunotherapy more targeted towards the world's 0.1% of population that's already getting the best healthcare. You know what? Precision medicine is way more needed in developing countries. And it can be made more affordable. So let's start thinking, let's start reverse engineering what it means. Let's start thinking, I don't know, are we allowed to say trade names in this talk? Maybe not. But you might have all heard of this stool test, right? That
We
screens
don't
for
have
cancer.
restrictions. You're okay if you want to mention
Okay.
it.
Cool. So you must have all heard about Cologuard, right? That a container comes to your home, you can push out stool and you send it out, and your physician can tell you if you've got colon cancer or not. Yeah, I mean, why does US need this? We've already got gastroenterologists who are making a lot of money, who can scope you whenever you want. We need this in Asia, where there is one gastroenterologist for 100 million people, right? We need this stool test in Africa, where there are countries where they don't even have a single gastroenterologist. So that's where it's needed the most. But guess what? People just can't get beyond thinking Cologuard is the best thing that happened to the US. No, we need this more. We need this technology to become more affordable. We need precision medicine and all of this way more in developing countries, which is why I'm a huge proponent of making science work for developing countries. And in turn, we can make healthcare more affordable in the US as well. Which is why start thinking about USAID, start thinking about World Bank, start thinking about developing science for developing countries. We just submitted a $3 million grant this week with Google as our partner to USAID on developing a data technology system for humanitarian assistance. Because guess what? If that works in developing countries, it'll work for FEMA here too in the US. There is some great work, a lot of money out there in developing countries to do good science, which works globally. The other way to get money is from private medical groups. And these are groups that exist in every healthcare system. Think about the neurosurgeons, the plastic surgeons, the orthopedics guys, the anesthesia guys, practices that make a lot of money. And all of them have this need to do some kind of research, which is where you can be like, hey, some of you are anesthesiologists and some of you are orthopedic surgeons. And you can be like, hey, you know what? I can probably do some of the research for this private medical group and help your residents and fellows. And, maybe in turn, you can fund me $100,000 a year. And some of these private medical groups will be very happy to do that. In fact, I've had offers to do that kind of work that I actually turned down because I was already getting funded from North Star Anesthesia. I couldn't just spend all my time doing work for an orthopedic group and a neurosurgery group and an anesthesia group. But this kind of money is available. And I'm not an anesthesiologist. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. And I was able to get this money. So if you are an orthopedic surgeon or an anesthesiologist or a resident in training in any of these specialties that make a lot of money, this money's out there. It'll be much more easier for you to tap into this compared to me. Then we come to the world of industry. This is in some ways easy money compared to the first slide. If you have a good idea, if you have health services research, they will love health services research, right? If you can do research that shows their product works, they'll love you. They'll give you money, whatever you ask. Sometimes it's an observational study. You're not really doing anything except telling them, hey, this was your product used on this many people in this region, and these were the outcomes. So you're not, it's not an intervention trial. They're really calling for simple kind of database, large database kinds of studies, and they're willing. And then there are RFAs for breakthrough science from Johnson & Johnson, from Bristol Myers Squibb, from all of these pharmaceutical companies who are looking for the next breakthrough ideas that they can use to improve their products. So there are medical device companies, right? There's a whole world out there. Once you get into this industry, there's just it's a nice world, because at the end of the day, think about this, right? Without industry, research would remain on shelves. So we have to thank the Pfizers and the BioNTechs for the COVID-19 vaccine. So there are purists out there who don't like industry, but then for all of those people, I ask them, all right, how much of the science that you've done in your lab has actually reached anyone? And then they don't have a reply to that. So so we need industry. As much as we are academics, we need industry to take our science to the people. And so I sit on the advisory board of health practice division of an innovation center in Silicon Valley. That is Europe's largest manufacturer of semiconductors and microelectronics, and we are competitors with Fitbit, with iWatch, with all kinds of wearable and sensor medical technology for preventive medicine, etc. It's some of the most brilliant work that I've seen. Some of the most breakthrough innovative ideas that have the potential to monitor complications out of chronic diseases and it's great if you can kind of balance having an academic career with having one foot in the industry. It's just so fascinating, because you are bridging that gap from lab to the people. And so you're really involved in every step of the process. You're doing research in your lab, and then you are working with the industry to make that science into a product, and then market it and help the startups to take it to people. It's a beautiful space to be in. I think MD PhDs, physician scientists, DO PhDs are great people to live in that kind of space, which spans both worlds. And it's needed. It's really needed to push science and advance medical practice and science. So that's where I'll end, and I'll stop sharing now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Time for question and answer.
Yeah, so I guess I could start off the question and answer. If anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A. Oh, there is a question that just came in, so that's great. Well, let me just ask this question first, and I'll read this question from Sana and ask that after. But I guess one question I had for maybe all of you, maybe particularly to Paige and Cindy, is about what steps trainees can take early on in the process to be competitive for these very competitive grants and awards. Obviously, some of our trainees may be somewhat junior, and so how can they shape their career trajectory from now on, let's say at early residency or early fellowship stage, to make sure they have the publications or small grant funding or other career development milestones that your reviewers would see as being ideal to actually get an award. And then the second part of the question is, if someone applies for an award and don't get it, can they apply again? And do those applicants tend to have a higher rate of success? So maybe Paige, you want to start with you, or yeah.
Sure. So I think one of the things that I want to note is it's good to start early. So hopefully information like this today and going to search our websites, as well as I also want to note another consortium to kind of consider as well. But looking and starting early and reaching out to program officers is encouraged. And so even if you feel like, oh, I'm not ready now, I have and do have conversations with those that are preparing to kind of talk through maybe their specific scenarios and where they're at with their training, if they have questions about those types of things. So starting early to ask around, not only to program officers, but to those who may have received the award that you either know or may even perhaps reach out to. I think most of the awardees that we have been fabulous individuals as well as scientists. And so I would encourage folks to reach out to those who have received the award to talk with them about how they prepped, because nothing like getting it from those who have already done what you want to do. And then I think the other thing to note is, yes, we absolutely encourage folks to come back, and we actually don't get a huge number of those who reapply. And some of that may be, you know, if you kind of wait till later on in the game to apply to kind of get your publications up, you kind of take the option of shoot one shot and try and get the award, or maybe, you know, start earlier and maybe apply, and maybe you do get it as a kind of younger resident or fellow, or you have an opportunity to try again. So I kind of encourage the latter, but understand that it's quite a toilsome process to apply. And so understand if folks wait. But I think those are the things that I'd note right off the bat of things to consider to do that could help.
Thanks for that question. So to add, I'll try not to be repetitive, but I would say that, you know, publications are important, but I wouldn't say that the end all be all. Let's see what recommendations I would give. One is, if you're interested in research, get involved in doing research and try to find, if clinically you see a need or an area that attracts you, well, experiment with that research, try to get involved in to build your track record of, so a reviewer, you know, 5-10 years from now can see that you are always focused in a certain area, even if, you know, you might not know what you want to research, but that you have been building towards something, right? That there's something that's been a theme that's driving you, and it doesn't have to be very specific, but, you know, that alone, having clarity about what is it you want to improve in the long term can help build your set of activities, research, and other that will speak in your, when somebody looks at your biographical sketch, right? In terms of, and also maybe you didn't participate, maybe you didn't publish a lot, but maybe you were involved in a research project where you led a trial or like a small pilot trial, or, you know, it's the set of experiences, I would say. The other thing is, as early as you can, even if you're not writing a proposal, you know, many institutions have these courses, right, to write grant proposals. And that's something that you refine, right? So it doesn't, we see a difference between the proposals for our postdoctoral awards and for our faculty awards. And some of those postdocs, like the proposals look a lot like the early faculty awards. And I think that maybe they have been training a lot, you know, it's just something that can definitely be improved. And I think it's a skill that you build. Those are, I think, two things that I would, and definitely, so for us, as Paige said, speak to those that you see that you see you want to be like this, person in terms of I want to be as successful as, however you define success, to learn how they went about, as Farquan said, I've learned from your talk. How would one know to approach a clinical practice for funding, right? So those things that you learn by talking to people.
And if I may, I'm going to add on one thing that I didn't note, but I think is important. Connecting with a research mentor to kind of help refine your ideas, and mentors, maybe I'm add an S on that, to help refine your ideas and your approach, I think is something that is critical for continuing to develop in addition to kind of the things that have already been noted, and can really make a difference in how you've thought out your idea and how that comes across to the reviewers.
I was just about to say what Paige said, so I would strongly second that. Mentorship is important at every level of your life, and sometimes it's just like Paige said, it's mentors, and especially, I mean, if you can get mentors to review your grants, multiple people reviewing grants before you submit is key.
Great. Okay, so we have a question about the length of time from the clinical terminal degree till when you can apply, and this is actually an issue with NIH R01s as well that have a time limit on ESI, or early stage investigator status. So the question was for the CAMS award specifically, Paige and Burroughs welcome, that lists the MD graduation year as the beginning point of this, I guess, 13-year trajectory. Why does that not count? Why does the residency graduation year not count? Because in other countries, there can be a lag time between graduation from medical school and starting residency in the US, which would disadvantage foreign medical graduates.
Gotcha. Point taken, and fairly raised. I think we are constantly trying to hone in on what is most equitable across the board as we think about timeframes for to degree as well as other eligibility criteria. So I don't know that we had considered shifting that as of right this moment, but I've noted it, and I appreciate the point being raised. And I think historically, the kind of rationale behind that, it was just kind of making sure that we're within that early career window, but it's a fair point that's been raised.
All right, well, certainly something that we could advocate for in the future. So yeah, great point, Afsaneh. So Sahara has another question about the pandemic related delays. So Sahara is preaching to the choir of Jennifer and me, who've worked for the last couple of years on very carefully delineating these pandemic related delays in training regarding obviously lab closures, family life, including young children, and have these programs at Burroughs Wellcome or at Doris Duke helped to mediate some of these problems by any mechanism in terms of eligibility, in terms of what types of expectations you have of the trainees who apply for your programs?
Can start very quickly. We do at least 3 things that come to mind. One is, as you said, be very mindful of eligibility. And if somebody might have that we have an eligibility window, and if for some reason caregiving related to the pandemic or pandemic related delays have delayed the trajectory, we actively take eligibility exceptions. We make exceptions. So we open the door and say, just tell us if you're affected, and we'll consider that and try to be as flexible. We do the same with maternity leaves and things like that, or leaves of any sort that are justified. Then the other one is we have made available a portion in our biographical sketch. We don't use the NIH, we have our own template where we give an opportunity for an optional sharing to the reviewers. If your research was delayed and that's reflected, and maybe you don't have as many publications, you're concerned about that, you can say that. And the third thing is we ask the reviewers that to consider those impacts of the pandemic, and if somebody shared that statement in their biographical sketch, to use that as context when they evaluate it. So we don't hear these comments of, oh, this person has been in such position for so long, and yet they only have, this many value. That's so we try to remind them of that.
That's great. That's even better than the NIH.
Yeah,
or they don't
right.
want them to talk about their challenges with the COVID pandemic.
Right.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and then within BWF, having just completed a cycle here recently, I think a lot of our discussion was around what's been happening throughout the pandemic. So that was certainly something that was at the forefront and certainly pushed for our reviewers to consider what was happening in and outside of the lab with respect to where folks were at, both on a personal level and with their research and how the pandemic impacted that. So we haven't put in formal structures as of yet, but certainly our reviewers are conscious and focused around making sure that that's not something that we overlook with respect to where candidates are and the impacts that the pandemic has had on their life and productivity.
Great. Well, I'll just ask one question, then we have another follow-up question, but a question for Khan. So you've been very diligent at leveraging other institutions or medical organizations for funding. I know at my own institution and even the institution where I completed fellowship, there was a common database of grants and opportunities that was sent out to trainees who might be eligible. And that was really institution-wide. Now, of course, there's no national type database across institutions for these types of opportunities. I was wondering, have you come across any particular databases or mechanisms that you were able to find out about these opportunities? And is there any way that that type of database or information store could be shared?
Sure. So and there are a couple of sources, right? You hear about people getting funded, and so anytime it's not an R01 or it's not NIH, I'm like, hey, what is this? So anytime I hear that is something non-NIH, I'm like, okay, I need to know more about this foundation, about the source. And so make that a habit. Every time you hear something that's non-NIH, that's non-NSF, just meet that person. I've stopped meeting people who get R01s or NSF because I know that, right? Tell me about something that I don't know. So you see, you need to I would say you need to be inquisitive, not just about science, but about everything around you. So that's where it starts. And that's how you will become a good scientist or good at anything, even a physician, right? Just try to get to the bottom of something that you're hearing for the first time. Anything that you hear for the first time, you need to know more about this. Just make that a habit. And the other thing is at Michigan State University, we get this funding update from a variety of organizations, right? So there is this, so I get an international funding update every 2 weeks from the Institute of Global Health and Global Ideas that we have here at Michigan State. And they have a whole brochure of new RFAs that are coming out. And that's been a great source for me to find out about. And we get the same, we get alerts and updates about funding from Gates Foundation, from BWF, from Kellogg Foundation, from Henry Ford, MacArthur Foundation was a big one as well. So those are the sources.
Well, I guess we're sort of out of time. There was a question to Cindy about Doris Duke providing feedback, but perhaps maybe Cindy could message Sana about that.
Or can you comment quickly on that? I think I've had that question asked a couple of times before, whether or not you guys would be able to provide feedback.
We do provide, and we disclose that in the request for proposals, typically what to expect, what the expectation is. If someone doesn't get comments, it might be because the reviewers didn't provide it or your application wasn't reviewed. That's also a possibility.
But usually you guys provide feedback.
We do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, And does Burroughs Welcome Fund do that as well, to provide reviewer feedback?
So we do specifically for those who make it to the finalist pool. So those who interview and perhaps are unsuccessful can provide feedback on the interview process. We do not require that or we do not have and provide written or verbal feedback for those who perhaps do not make it to the finalist pool.
Got it. Yeah, and just one comment, just dovetailing on Furkan's insights on funding. So I think for those who are on the academic track, it'll be good to make sure your tenure metrics can be met also with these alternative funding sources, because some institutions are pretty strict about that. I mean, obviously, getting funding from other sources, whether it be industry or private practice, can help you float your experiments and generate data to allow you to apply for NIH funding, DoD funding, et cetera. But sometimes certain institutions are very strict, like they are only going to advance you if you have like NIH funding, and they don't care if you have like a Pfizer grant or whatnot. So always just kind of make sure you know your tenure metrics. But either way, science is science. Like if this helps to fund that $50,000 to allow you to sequence that next cohort of patients and generate data, that's still great. You're moving science forward. So thank you so much to all our wonderful speakers today and also the foundations that you represent that have supported physician scientists for a couple of decades. And also thank you to Furkan for talking about your experiences with getting complementary and alternative funding sources to enable science to move forward, some of which sounds like very important, underserved areas in the world as well. Thank you to all of our attendees for coming on today. We will make this recording available if all of our speakers are okay with that. And we were planning to have a complimentary session that will bring on some industry speakers like Pfizer and Novartis to see if they would be able to talk about some of their career opportunities as well as funding opportunities as well. So thank you everyone for coming on.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.
See you guys later. Have a good day.